Now, Singapore will ease out of the COVID-19 circuit breaker, reopening progressively from 2nd of June. There will be 3 phases to protect people at work, in the community and at home. Phase 1 will focus on restarting businesses and economic activities that don't carry a high risk of COVID-19 transmission. Schools at all levels will also reopen, either in phases or with their cohorts thinned. Families will be able to visit parents or grandparents, but with restrictions in place to protect vulnerable seniors. Now, the multi-ministry task force says a high level of vigilance by everyone will help the country regain some degree of normalcy.
If community transmission rates can remain low and the situation remains under control over the next few weeks, we can then move into phase 2 of safe transition, with a gradual resumption of more activities, both economic and social activities, and gradually transition to phase 3, which is a new normal to provide a safe nation. The multi-ministry task force will keep a very close watch on the situation. I want to caution that we may have to tighten some measures in a targeted way, or slow down our transition to the next phase should there be a significant resurgence of cases.
Now, 1/3 of Singapore's workforce and nearly 3/4 of the economy will kick into action in 2 weeks. At the moment, only essential services, or about 20% of businesses, are allowed to open their premises. Now, the first phase includes firms in manufacturing and production, finance and insurance. It also covers wholesale trade, transport and storage, as well as professional services. Selected services such as motor vehicle and aircon servicing will also be allowed to open. Hairdressers will be able to offer more than just basic haircuts. Now, the task force says there are likely to be multiple stages in phase 2. In the earliest part, businesses including retail and F&B outlets like restaurants could be allowed to open. Other activities such as entertainment events might also be allowed. Companies will have to put in place new measures to ensure they can restart operations safely.
Well, the task force is allowing such businesses to open in phase 1 because they mostly have limited or no interactions with the public and operate in what the task force calls a static controlled environment that can put in safe measures more quickly. Now, some also have significant economic linkages within and outside of Singapore that help to continue trade and secure essential supplies. Trade and Industry Minister Chan Chun Sing also said that a consideration is into making sure that workers are kept safe. Still, he says those reopening must complete safe management measures, and these include things like safe distancing, staggered office hours, no cross-deployment of staff, proper accommodation of workers, and making sure staff don't mingle out of work. He said any firm that doesn't comply with these rules will be forced to close. Still, Mr. Chan added that most of the workforce must still maintain work-from-home arrangements as much as possible.
Companies will be required to submit their manpower details within 2 weeks of resuming operations. So they will need to submit the number of workers who need to be on site. The information and website for the submission will be made known next week. I'd just like to say that we urge all companies to practice good management practices so that they minimize the number of workers required on site to the smallest number possible. And we will benchmark the various companies across the same industries and sector. If the manpower numbers are excessive, we will reach out to the company to understand their requirements and to review how we can better support the company and adopt a higher telecommuting workforce.
Now, as for companies that cannot open from phase 1, they still have to prepare safe management measures. And these include retail outlets, F&B outlets, gyms and tuition centres. Mr. Chan said they had to think of new measures for them to open their doors again safely. And that's especially when many may need more measures because they interact more with the public. To this end, a task force has been formed to help retailers and restaurant owners do so.
Now, schools will reopen in 2 weeks, but student access to physical classrooms will be staggered. From 2nd of June, Term 3 will start for primary and secondary school students, but not all of them will head straight back to physical premises. Only graduating cohorts in primary 6, secondary 4 and 5 will make a full return. Others will undertake weekly rotations of home-based learning and classroom time. Junior colleges and Millennia Institute will manage how they will have 50% of students back in schools. Institutes of higher learning will largely continue with remote classes, but return to school for practical and lab sessions. MOE kindergartens will also return fully from 2nd of June, as well as K1 and K2 students in preschools. Nursery 1 and 2 students will return from 8th of June, while infant care and playgroup will resume on 10th of June. And Gwyneth joins us now live. So, Gwen, can you just tell us what's the rationale for staggering the students' return to school and why certain groups get to go back first?
I think the entire priority that's being put here is to support working parents' needs. I mean, workplaces are going to start opening again in 2 weeks' time, and there are childcare needs that working parents have. So, for example, special education needs students will also return fully to schools by 8th of June because their parents do need additional support in not only taking care of their children, but also in supporting their learning. In terms of younger students also need more help. So in primary and secondary schools, in these groups, the priority is being given, as you mentioned, to graduating cohorts. So your primary 6, Sec 4 and Sec 5 students, naturally because they are sitting for their national examinations this year and therefore their learning needs more guidance and support, especially as they've been doing home-based learning for the past few weeks. So that's why this priority is being given to certain groups of students, and for everyone else, they would do a weekly rotation of classes, 1 week home-based learning, 1 week back in school. For institutes of technical education, they will also take on this rotation and return back to schools for practical sessions, for lab sessions. And also this entire weekly rotation, Education Minister Ong Ye Kung said that this also supports what he has heard from parents, which is that their workplaces, their companies are practicing weekly rotations of work from home. So hopefully this kind of pattern will help them to manage the schedules, when to send the children to school and all that. But overall, the entire idea is to reduce the number of students as well who are going to be in school so that they can enforce better safe distancing measures, because there will be things such as exam-style seating in classrooms instead of sitting in groups. For instance, there will be more sanitizing of high-touch areas. There will be temperature screening. All of these measures we will expect them to be in place in schools, whether or not children return to them. Additionally, preschools will receive additional support. So they will receive free deliveries of sanitizers and shields by the end of this month. There will be staggered pick-up and drop-off times. Preschool centers will also have access to an 80% subsidy for a grant to support technical databases, for example, for temperature taking. And part of that also is this ongoing project of swabbing every single preschool teacher in Singapore that we've seen go on for the past few days. We know from a few days ago that some 6,000 preschool teachers have already been swabbed. We're expecting a total of about 30,000, and the task force is expecting to pick up some cases during this swabbing, and hopefully by doing so before the 1st of June, preschool centers can better rearrange and manage their manpower again. However, Social and Family Development Minister Desmond Lee did say during the task force that, good news, no cases have been picked up so far.
So, Gwyneth, I want to talk to you about learning as well. How do you see that being disrupted or affected?
So by and large, I think the main impact will be for the coming mid-year national examination. So this will be the O and A-level mother tongue exam that's going to be taking place next month, as well as the A-level H3 exam that's taking place this month. Now, the main thing is that candidates will be required to wear masks, but also if they are under quarantine, stay-home notice or leave of absence, they will not be allowed to sit for the exam at all. They have to wait for the year-end sitting if one is available. Otherwise, the examinations board will use an established procedure to derive a subject grade for them. So I think, by and large, for now, this is the main impact on students. Another impact will also be that there will be no NAPFA test this year because there's not enough time to train for that. And there will also be no national school games, unfortunately, for school athletes. But also, in terms of how overall learning will be affected, well, Education Minister Ong Ye Kung actually said that he was confident that overall learning should not be disrupted. And this is compared to other countries, he said, who ceased schooling, formal schooling very early on in the pandemic. And he said that because Singapore has held out for quite some time before schools were closed in April, hopefully this means that learning will not be that disrupted.
I think there's a lot of awareness, a lot of literature talking about the detrimental effect of students and children as a result of this closure in schools, and some go to the extent of saying it may even set them back for many years. Fortunately for us, we ensure that learning continue through home-based learning. And throughout this whole period, we managed to ensure that schools are safe and students are kept away from the virus.
Well, in the meantime, some social activities will be allowed to resume, but with limits. And these include visiting senior parents and places of worship. Now, CHERYL Goh was at today's news conference and she joins us now live. So, CHERYL, what are some of the restrictions being relaxed as the circuit breaker ends?
Well, OTELLI, so the circuit breaker, yes, it's ending on the 1st of June, but life won't return to normal immediately. Some activities are allowed to resume, and this is because of the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to managing the outbreak. Community cases are down to single digits in the past week, and the dormitory situation has also stabilized. Large clusters in the dorms have also not spread to the wider community. So among the relaxations that come with this, households will be allowed to visit their parents and grandparents if they're not staying together. And this will be allowed once a day, but only limited to 2 persons per visit. However, it's really important to note that to protect seniors who are still more vulnerable to the infection, they should stay at home and let their children or grandchildren come to them. Now, in a similar vein, senior activity centres will gradually resume activities in a safe and controlled manner, and these activities will be held in smaller groups. This is really to address the psychosocial well-being of seniors, especially those with little or no social support. Some healthcare services, such as specialist outpatient services and medical procedures, will also be allowed to resume, and they will be prioritized by healthcare providers based on medical necessity and available capacity. Some examples are surgeries for advanced cataracts and preventative health services such as flu vaccinations. However, our Health Minister Gan Kim Yong, he did warn that with these more activities and interactions, we are also likely to see a rise in new community cases.
This will be done in phases to reduce the risk of a second wave of cases of infections, as many countries have experienced after they have lifted their control measures. As we begin to resume more activities, we do expect us to see a rise in daily new cases. The key is to detect these cases and contain them quickly so as to prevent a sharp rise in the number of cases or the emergence of a large cluster.
Now, what are the plans when it comes to transport and travel? We also heard that there are also updates for religious activity.
Yes, so authorities are preparing to ensure that public transport remains a safe mode of transport as more people leave their homes to return to work and to school and, like I mentioned, to visit their loved ones. But so what employers need to do is to play their part by having staggered hours, and this is to ease the commuter load during peak hours. The task force did acknowledge that it may be difficult to maintain physical distancing during peak periods on public transport along certain routes, so there's a need for other safe management measures.
And that will include wearing of masks and requiring commuters not to speak to one another or to speak on the phone, so that they can they avoid spreading droplets while they are in an enclosed space, and we can keep public transport safe during this period.
Meanwhile, international travel will also gradually resume for instances such as essential business travel, although no specific timeline was given for this yet. Now, another thing to note is that places of worship for all faiths will also be allowed to reopen on 2nd of June, though only for private worship and devotions. So that means no mass congregations of any kind. And only 5 members of the same household are allowed to be at these places of worship at any one time.
I know Singaporeans will be disappointed. Many have been hoping that with the end of the circuit breaker, they will be able to go out freely, to socialize with their friends, to meet their families and relatives, and even dine together. Unfortunately, all of these activities will have to wait.
So the task force is really seeking the public's understanding on why such measures are necessary, and they added that the restrictions must be lifted in a careful and calibrated manner so as not to risk a flaring up of the virus again or to sacrifice the efforts that really all of us have made over the past weeks of the circuit breaker. It's back to you, OTELLI.
Well, thanks very much, Cheryl, for those updates. Now, in the meantime, the government will also be providing more help for those businesses and workers who will not be able to resume activities immediately when the circuit breaker ends. Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat says he will announce details in Parliament next Tuesday in a ministerial statement, the 4th budget speech this year. There will be live television and radio coverage starting at 3:30 p.m.